You hear it all the time about what's going on in the pharmaceutical world. There's just in our first 2 flights, a well-known university is just about to get to the point where there's a certain type of breast cancer they believe they can cure through gene therapy. Just in our first 2 flights. That's just amazing.
So the first question goes to Mike. As these space becomes more accessible, how do you envision the landscape of LEO infrastructure evolving in the next 20 or 30 years?
So when I think about where we're at, and Tej really laid that out very well, we're at a normal point in the history of humanity. If you look back, there's this innate desire of humankind to want to explore. We always want to know what's beyond, and it's really what has made humanity advance. And so typically what happens is governments fund large ships that sail across the ocean, explorers that go to in our case, the west coast of what is the United States now. These governments, usually with the help of visionaries who convince them that this is an important thing to do, fund the exploration, which is exactly what we've been doing for 50 or 60 years in orbit and beyond. Governments have spent a substantial amount of money building spacecraft to explore far-reaching planets, also our moon. They've sent humans to space, built space stations. This has all been government funded. But remember what happens in all exploration cases, humanity follows. So the governments fund. Next thing that happens is the pioneers come through and they start setting up an ability to purchase certain goods so that a smaller contingent of regular people can go and see what this is all about. And that results ultimately in settling. Now, when you think about where humanity is today in space, we're exactly at the point where we're going to pioneer. And what that means is more and more companies, entities, are going to make space available to the rest of us, either through a process of providing the infrastructure that houses humans, or provide transportation, or provide services and goods for people to live in space. And so that's where we are. We're pioneers. And it's this pioneering spirit that makes the difference about whether or not humanity is going to go beyond just exploration. And that's an important step in this process when we think about what's going to happen 20 years from now, because we really are the first pioneers. That's really what we're talking about doing. We're taking over for the governments. We're providing these capabilities and these services as an entity that anybody can take advantage of. Now, it's not just about people flying to space, by the way. It's the research and manufacturing you can do in space. So don't just think about how many people can afford to fly to space. Think about it in terms of the microgravity environment and the advantages it's going to have for all of us back here at home. This is really the biggest use case that's going to be like the internet was. We can't even imagine today what's going to happen, what's going to be discovered. What is important, much like the internet, and Tej has heard me say this 1,000 times, the internet was wildly successful. Most of us thought, oh, that's great, some access to data, that's fantastic. But what it was access to data and access to the rest of us. And any kid with a good idea could sit in his pajamas in his bedroom and program what turned out to be an app, or even beyond apps, tools that ultimately companies in a lot of cases stepped in and purchased, or they grew up to what they are today. But if you'd ask anybody way back when the internet was just getting started, what did you think was going to happen I don't know of any visionary that would tell you that, yeah, exactly what's happening today is what I predicted. And this is exactly the case in the microgravity environments in space. It's easy for us to start talking about what we think is going to happen, but until we get every human being on the planet thinking that, hey, I can do this. I see the advantage. I have an idea. Let me go see if I can implement that idea in space. That's when you know you're going to unlock the true potential. And all of us in this room, and all of our friends, and all of our family are going to have this opportunity just like the internet was. And so when I look 20 years from now, I see this booming business. I see the manufacturing of goods that come home and make our lives better here, the manufacturing of alloys. They've done some testing on orbit where an alloy made in orbit was twice as strong as its cousin on the ground. That's just phenomenal. So you think of the applications of that, there's thousands of industry that if they could just get past that one high stress point in their product, the product could be far superior. You hear it all the time about what's going on in the pharmaceutical world. John touched on it a little bit. There's, just in our first 2 flights, a well-known university is just about to get to the point where there's a certain type of breast cancer they believe they can cure through gene therapy. Just in our first 2 flights. That's just amazing. So in 20 years, just imagine, people are going to start, we're making access available because it's not exploration, it's not go ask the government, can I use your platform, which governments aren't keen on that. It's about, there's a platform, all I got to do is make a phone call, ask, how I get there. Now, our job is to help you get there, that's what we're all about, and let you try that out. 20 years from now, there'll be multiple platforms on orbit. There will be platforms specific for purposes. I imagine that eventually some engine company, some jet engine company, is going to go, my God, I want to build turbine blades in space because my engine is going to be half as heavy as it normally is to do the same function, which is going to make a huge difference in plane travel. It's those kinds of things. So there's going to be plants in orbit that manufacture things. There will ultimately be destinations just for tourism. It's not our biggest push. It's one of the things we support, but that will happen. There will be multi-use platforms. There will be way stations. And we think about it, we see a future even beyond 20 years where you ultimately have so many different platforms in space that you're really going to end up putting a very large, what I like to refer to as a city in space, with a large rotating section like you all saw in 2001 in Space Odyssey or whatever your favorite space station movie is. The rotating section is where the families live. It's where it's almost a G, so it's normal. You can have parks and ponds and schools and theaters and shops. And then the center section, unlike all these movies, by the way, it does not rotate because you need the microgravity environment there. But it's a very large central section to support all the work that you're doing in low Earth orbit. And then families will move to orbit with whoever has the job, just like today families move to wherever the job is for whichever spouse has that job. And they can live and work and go to school and advance themselves while the parent or parents work on board in the center section doing whatever is necessary. So this is going to take off, and imagine the internet. This is what's going to happen in the future. It's going to start with Axiom Space for sure, but we will be one of very many in 20 years from now. Thank you.
And elaborating on your point, we need to talk about the Axiom Space as a company. And can you explain some of the efforts that the company is doing with regards to the station, and maybe if you can give some insights and updates about the spacesuit, they'll be much appreciated.
Absolutely. So always appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing and who we are. Axiom Space was founded back in January 2016 specifically as a result of what NASA and the partnership said back in 2014. They made it very clear, as I said earlier, that they're not going to build the next space station, but they need one, and they were going to cede low Earth orbit to commercial industry. My partner and I got together and through a long series of conversations decided that that's what we were going to do. We would form a company to build the first commercial space station. And so that's what we've done. We have won a contract with NASA to be able to attach our space station to the International Space Station, as I mentioned to you. It was a huge deal for us as a company because only one company can attach to ISS. And of course, the current biggest users of space today are the 15 countries that are on the International Space Station today. And so we're designing a space station that's modular. Our first module will fly to ISS in late 2026. It'll house 4 crew, have its own docking and berthing ports. At that point, we will relieve the largest constraints on ISS today for traffic to come in. That's the providing life support for additional crew persons and providing docking ports for the spacecraft to arrive and depart from. And then about on 9-month centers, we'll bring another spacecraft up that hosts another 4 crew and some research, and then our research and manufacturing module will show up about 9 months later. And then towards the end of ISS life, around 2028 timeframe, we'll fly our big power and cooling module, and we'll check it out. And during that year, we'll be moving everything over for the current plan, which is for ISS to be configured for deorbit in early 29, so that's we're safely out of space before 2030 ends. So that's kind of the plan. In the meantime, we have been fortunate enough to, NASA has provided opportunities for commercial entities to fly commercial flights to space, much like John participated in with us. So they've done 4, and we've won all 4 of those. We've flown 2 of them. Our third flight's in January of 2024, and our third flight's in January 2024, and our 4th flight will be in August. NASA expects to compete the next ones here in a little while, and we expect to compete for those. Those are really important flights, not just because of the revenue stream, which is from a business perspective and from an investor perspective, the revenue is awesome. But also it's us and NASA learning together how we operate. Because when we bring a module up that houses 4 crew, suddenly the ISS is going to go from 7 crew to 11 crew, and then when the next module comes up 9 months later, it's going to go from 11 crew to 15 crew, so we will over double the size of ISS, and we have to know how to work together. And so that's parcel to why NASA keeps choosing us, because of they want us to get through that as well. The last thing I'll talk about is we're not just a low Earth orbit commercial company, we're also an exploration company. We have had an opportunity. We competed for a commercial spacesuit with NASA, primarily because we needed a spacesuit for our own space station. But surprisingly, the competition ended up so that we won the lunar surface suit outright. So the next crew to put their boots on the moon will be in an Axiom spacesuit. We're very excited about that. It's on the Artemis 3 mission. But not only did we win that one outright, just a couple of months ago, we also were asked to build the spacesuit for the International Space Station, which is great. That's the suit we were building anyway because we needed it for our own purposes. And so that really, for us, began this process for us getting into the exploration side of things. So we expect to participate in the lunar rover, and we're doing a lot of early forward work on the lunar habitat, because keeping people alive in low Earth orbit is a lot like keeping them alive on the surface of the moon. There's really no environment, so you have to provide it all yourself. So as a company, we're headed in a direction where not only will we be the first commercial full-up space station in low Earth orbit, but the countries that have been utilizing ISS for the last, by then, 30 years, they will evolve on to our platform when ISS ends. And so we're honored that NASA has chosen us both to be that provider of a space station capability, but also to build the spacesuits for their crews, both in low Earth orbit and on the surface of the moon.